Turn to the person next to you and say, I am a piece of work. Okay, welcome to Manifest. Yeah. We are, this is the second week in a series called Piece of Work, where we're examining 5 traits that we all need to succeed or to reach our full potential. And we're doing this by studying one of the Bible's premier pieces of work, the Apostle Peter. Last week I joked about the fact that in all the jokes about coming to the gate of heaven, somehow St. Peter is the one at the gate. I find that extremely encouraging. When you approach the gate of heaven, you're like, oh, if Jesus can forgive him, I should be fine. So he's this guy that has so many rough edges in the Bible. He's one of the 12 apostles, in case you don't know who that is. And in other words, the first 12 people that Jesus asked to follow him, and he did not get it right at all. And so we're learning from the Apostle Peter, and he's really encouraging to us exactly for those reasons. Now, last week we talked about how Peter, though, he's got 5 traits. Either he had them or he grew into these 5 traits that we also need if we're going to become everything God called us to be. So we're going to kind of trace that today. I'm going to explore a different trait. Last week, we talked about his insatiable curiosity that took him so far in his relationship with God. We talked about this fact that Jesus, what he did is he actually he invited Peter into this like kind of a journey of discovery, right? He awakened his curiosity by speaking destiny into his identity. So here's the moment, just to recap, in case you missed that last week. What he did is the first time Jesus ever met Peter, he actually said, hey, you're Simon, that's his name. His name was Simon, which means to hear. And he looked at him and said, you're Simon, but you're going to become Peter. You're going to become Simon Peter. And Peter means rock. So if you keep listening, Peter, if you run with that curiosity, and you listen to me in particular, you're going to become a rock that I'm going to build on. And we talked about how Peter kind of walked away from that going, cool, I get to become the rock. And his brother Andrew was like, don't read too much into it. You know, that whole, it's a sibling rivalry. But Peter, here's the interesting thing. Interesting thing. Peter doesn't do much with that revelation. It's the weirdest thing. Can you imagine, like, whether you believe it or not in Jesus, let's pretend this morning you do, okay? Let's say he is the Son of God. He's everything that he claims to be, would later rise from the dead and all that stuff. Imagine Jesus appears to you, okay? And he walks up to you. You've never met him before. And he says, hey, you're Jonathan, and you're going to become a rock. Jonathan goes, meh. Like, can you imagine him just kind of shrugging it off? The weirdest thing about Peter is this critical trait that we're going to talk about today is he did not have it in the beginning, but he got it by the end. And it's this trait of an all-in attitude. Believe it or not, Peter did not have an all-in attitude right from the beginning. He was not the most committed guy that you've ever met. Because what he did, right after having this major revelation about his destiny handed to him to wrestle with, what he actually did at the very beginning is he just went back fishing. So the Son of God, who's calling followers, calls him out, gives him a destiny. He's like, yeah, I'm going fishing. So he goes back. How do I know he went back fishing? Because the next verse where we meet Peter, he went back fishing. So here it is. Now, what I'm going to show you today is really interesting. So what I've got this book at home called A Harmony of the Gospels. It's just the coolest book ever. Because what it does is it takes Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it arranges all of the stories throughout those Gospels chronologically. Because you see things when you put them all together as one giant story that you don't see any other way. So it's super cool. So we know that Peter got this call from Jesus and then immediately turned around and kind of forgot about it, or at least was kicking it around but didn't do much with it. So here's what happens. Jesus wants him. Jesus is interested in him. So you know what he does? He shows up at work. Imagine this. So Jesus talks to you, Jonathan, and you're like, yeah, I'm wrestling with it. And then all of a sudden he's at your job. Like he shows up, so, hey, how's it going? So here's what actually happens. Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee. As Jesus walked along, he saw Simon, that's his name, remember, he's still Simon. He's still the hearer. He's not the rock yet. Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. So he's fishing. So here's what happens. Jesus says, come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people, or I'll make you fishers or a fisher of men. And at once, these two guys, they left their nets and followed him. And from that moment on, Peter never looked back, except that's not true. At all. I'll get into that in a little bit, okay? So Jesus, though, doesn't want to let Peter go. So he plants this seed, gets him thinking, gets him like reflecting on his life and what his purpose is, and then he shows up at work. And what is he doing there? Well, Jesus is basically helping him turn his curiosity into a quest. We talked about that last week, right? So Peter's like ruminating on this. How do you become a rock? How does this move forward exactly? I'm not sure what to do next. Jesus shows up at work and says, here's how it works. You follow me, and here's what it means. Here's how you're going to become a rock. You got to let me turn you into something you weren't before. What I'm going to turn you into is a fisher of people. I'm going to do this in your life. So Peter's like, oh, sweet, that's a little bit clearer. Again, so now you'd think Peter just went, yes, Lord, because it says that, right? It says that he dropped his nets, right? Him and his brother, and the dad's going, what the, like, why are you leaving? This is the family business. Where are you going? But he leaves. He just walks off the job site, starts following Jesus. Sees a couple of miracles, like he brings him home, meets the mother-in-law. She's got a fever. Jesus rebukes the fever. She's healed. That's the coolest thing ever. And then he sees maybe the water turned into wine. If you heard about that miracle, if you haven't, it doesn't happen all that often anymore. It's too bad. But he turns the water into wine. And then it looks as though Peter goes back fishing again. It's the weirdest thing. So Jesus has helped him turn his curiosity into a quest, and what makes it a quest is that he's committed to himself, not to Jesus yet. He's committed to himself. I'm going to chase this down. But he squirrels on Jesus, and he remembers that he's got to go back home. Maybe his dad texts him, is like, where are you? I don't know what it was, but somehow he turns around and he goes back fishing. How do I know you went back fishing? Because we find him fishing next when Jesus goes back. Now, here's the really fun part. Jesus drops this truth bomb on him. You're going to become the rock, right? Next time he shows up at work. Now Peter's like, he's not getting this commitment thing. Commitment is coming hard to Peter. How many of you can relate to that? You're like in, and then you're not. And then you're in, and then you're not. And you try something for like 3 days, reading your Bible, and then it just kind of drains out. Peter's like, yep, I'm there, right? So here's what Jesus does next. This is kind of a low blow. It's kind of a low blow, but he's the Son of God, so he can do whatever he wants. So now Jesus comes back to work, but he brings the crowd with him. So by now he's got this huge crowd following him. He's like, come on down. Let's go down to the lake, and let's hang out there. So Jesus is walking. He brings the mission to Peter. Now this is how it plays out. This is just the coolest thing. So one day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, just hanging out. Oh, this is where you work? I didn't know that. The people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. So this is sweet. This is so sweet because he's teaching, right? And Peter's right there. See, what happened is they'd fish all night. And then during the day, especially in the morning, like till noon or something, they clean the nets, clean the boats and everything. So that's happening right over Jesus' shoulder, right? So he brings the crowd right down like this and just kind of onto Simon's turf. And so now he's hearing the sermon, right? And he's remembering, right, I'm going to become a rock. And I did say I was going to follow him and become fishers of people, whatever that is. I don't know what that is. How do I take the next step? You can just picture, like this is just so strategic, so cool, right? So he saw at the water's edge 2 boats, Jesus. Whose boats are those? I don't know. Left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one that just happened to belong to Simon. Hey, can I use your boat? Well, now everyone's watching. No, it's my boat. Of course he's going to say yes, right? So you see how God's setting him up. It's so cool. And asked him to put out a little from shore, and then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Now again, picture this. So now he's teaching from the boat. He's sitting down, and Peter's also in the boat. There's nowhere to go. Right? There's just nowhere to go. He's not going to bail on, like he hasn't learned to walk on water yet. He's stuck in the boat. He's there, right? So then, what happens next? What do you think? How many of you heard this story? Okay, So this story is mind-boggling to me. And I really want you to pay attention because this is the kind of thing God will do for you. You'll be in the middle of your day, you'll be in the middle of a class, and you'll see a billboard, or the sun will come up, or like this happened to Jez, right? When you're at Elbow Falls, all of a sudden the clouds break, and you realize it's just for you. You don't know how you know, but you know. Jesus is going to show up in the middle of what you're doing because he wants you. He wants you. Now, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." So the carpenter is giving fishing advice. How well would you take advice from someone that doesn't know your stated profession? But Peter's really tired. In fact, look what he says. "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." So Jesus is just lucky he's awake. Like he's just half dead in the boat, right? He's tired, he's frustrated, he's feeling like a failure because this is his entire profession. So he's raw. He's just heard this amazing message by the Son of God. He's been set up. The mission comes to him, which is reminding him about Jesus said, we're going to catch people. How does that work exactly, right? And then Jesus says, let's go let's catch something, right? But you know what? Hey, because you say so, I will let down the nets. Why is Peter doing that? It's Simon, because he's the hearer. He's good at listening. He's not good at many things, but he's good at listening, at least some of the time. So he listens, and they lay down the net. So when they'd done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat, which would have been James and John, and they come and help. And they came and filled both boats so full they began to sink. Okay, again, picture this. They've been fishing all night. Then the carpenter says, you may want to try this. And suddenly, they're pulling in this net, and they're going, we're going to need a bigger boat. This is where that line came from. So they pull the fish over the side, and they're like, this is going to sink the boat. Get over here, get over here, get over here. So they're like filling the boats, like hand over fist with these fish are just like in the boat, right? They're like flopping all over the place, just scales. It just stinks. It's just horrible and beautiful at the same time. And so then the second boat starts to fill up. They're taking on water, right? Now remember, these are not huge fishing trawlers, right? They never actually talk about sails. They talk about rowing these boats, so they're that size, okay? So maybe they're like 18 inches deep, right? And so they fill these boats up to the point where they're sinking, which means they're up to the gills, literally. in fish. And it's at this moment that Peter remembers that Jesus is standing there in the boat. Because they've been so busy pulling the fish in, they forget all about Jesus. And then he remembers. Now watch this. This is just, so good. I feel like Steve Jobs unveiling the iPhone for the first time. It's so good. Okay. When Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." Stop. He fell at Jesus' knees because his feet are buried in fish. He can't see his feet. There's 18 inches of fish. So he goes down as far as he can go, which is at Jesus' knees. This little detail is one of those things that you go, this is a true story. Nobody thinks of things like this. He fell at Jesus' knees. Now, just picture this moment, please. Please. Jesus has been saying, I'm all about catching people. In other words, I'm all about drawing people into my net, showing them my love, transforming their life. Peter, I want you to join me in this mission. Peter's back and forth. What's he doing? He's refusing to get into the net. And in this moment, as he realizes who's in the boat with him, Peter flops down as one of the fish that Jesus has caught. He's finally surrendered. He's given himself over. This is an act of worship. And in this moment, he realizes Jesus isn't just a good teacher who's intriguing, who's dropping truth bombs that might be interesting to pursue. He's a Lord that deserves allegiance. He's somebody that he needs to give himself to. And he does. He flops himself down and even realizes in this moment, Whatever you've got going on makes me look so insignificant in comparison. Go away from me. I'm a sinful man. Now, Jesus has never walked on water until now. I don't know if Peter was expecting Jesus to get out of the boat and just walk on water away. Go away, like jump. I don't know what he's thinking, but I can't be next to you because you're so holy. Then, watch this. So then he and his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. So were James and John, sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. And then Jesus said to Simon, brings him right back around, right? Don't be afraid. We can be next to each other. In fact, I want to be next to you. I want to be with you. That's why I called you. From now on, you will fish for people. Remember what I said? Remember that quest I gave you? Remember the shape that I put on your curiosity to direct you towards this? You're kind of interested in pursuing this quest. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn your quest into a commitment. Right? So they left everything and followed him. Now picture that. Picture these 4 fishermen pulling this boat up on shore again. They're like flopping over the side, and people are coming running, and these fishermen are like, I'm done, I'm out. And they walk off the beach, and the people are like, is this like free? Right? And they're like, yep, take it, have it, we don't want it, we're in, we're going with Jesus. Now, from this moment on, it is true, Peter never looked back in the same way. He looked back in other ways. But this is his moment, see, because it wasn't just curiosity pulling him forward. It wasn't just a quest, a personal sense of fulfillment pulling him forward. It was the fact that he had given himself to this Jesus who deserved his allegiance. He had turned that thing into commitment. And this is where Jesus and Peter and James and John and Bartholomew and the 12 guys then follow Jesus around for a couple of years. Peter does not go back fishing during this time. He's in. He's all in. And during this time, he's watching people raised from the dead. He's watching demons being cast out of people, the lame walking, the blind seeing. He's watching the rejected get accepted. He's watching grace flow. The kingdom of God is coming. He's get to be part of it. Jesus involves him in miracles, and he gets to be used by God in a powerful way. He's completely in it, right? All of these guys are, except for the exception of maybe Judas. At some point, something started going sideways for Judas. But then the weirdest thing happened. Jesus, throughout this whole process, was doing something deeper than just commitment. He wants commitment. But what Jesus was doing is turning that commitment into a relationship. And the only way you do that is by spending time with someone. So maybe this is where you are, right? Maybe you're like, well, I've made a commitment, but I don't know if I'd call it a relationship. I know I'm supposed to call it a relationship with God, a relationship with Jesus, but if I'm honest, it's not really a relationship. It's an arrangement. It's a commitment. But through all of this, Jesus is saying, I'm drawing you deeper. I'm drawing you deeper. I want a commitment, but I want to build that commitment into a relationship. And Peter lets it happen. Because he's committed. And they grow in this relationship, this understanding. This is where all those other questions and answers come in. And Peter, wrestling through things. We're going to talk about how Peter had a teachable spirit in a couple of weeks, just how he was able to learn and grow and get stretched in all kinds of different ways in the context of relationship. Some of you right now need to examine, are you just living out a commitment, or are you living out a relationship growing out of that commitment? You can't have the relationship without the commitment. Not this kind. But do you have a relationship? Well, this relationship deepened and grew over those years that they spent together until one fateful weekend where it seemed like out of nowhere, even though Jesus had been trying to warn them about it, Jesus was arrested, taken into custody, questioned. Peter is just like freaking out. The disciples are freaking out. There's this moment in the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus is praying. He's in anguish, and the disciples, they're falling asleep on him. which is a signal, again, of this relationship is maybe as strong as Jesus had hoped. Could you not stay awake with me just 1 hour? Can't you just, I thought we were there. Have you ever felt like that with someone? Thought we had this, something, I guess we don't quite yet. Peter, just in a flurry of self-defense as the soldiers come for Jesus, whips out his letter opener and cuts off the high priest's ear, and Jesus is like, stop it, and puts it back on. And once he realizes what he's done, he drops the thing and bolts into the night, and all 12 disciples scatter. They leave Jesus. That night, Jesus is taken into questioning by the high priest, and later he will be tortured and killed. Something very interesting happens that night as they scatter. Here's what it looks like. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. This troublemaker, right? Peter followed, but at a distance. Right into the courtyard of the high priest, and there he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire, which is better than the other disciples. But this is the first time in the entire story where we're told Peter followed from a distance. See, with this distance, it was a calculated distance. It was how close can I follow without being implicated? How close can I get without it costing me something? Without fully identifying in public where it could mean danger. And none of us have ever been at that threshold. But it's calculated. And he figures out, I think I'm safe. I think I can say I'm a Jesus follower without going all the way in. And here's what happens next. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by, and when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were with that Nazarene Jesus, she said. But he denied it. What is that? Distance. He's distancing himself. I don't know or understand what you're talking about, he said, and he went out into the entryway. Again, calculating a safe distance. How close do I have to get to still be counted as a follower without actually going all in? None of us have ever played that game. But this is what he's doing. Let's go to the next one, Noah. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, this fellow's one of them. Again, he denied it. And after a little while, those standing near said to Peter, because the seed had now been planted, surely you are one of them, for you're a Galilean. Galileans had a certain accent that was easily recognizable. It was like Duck Dynasty. It was like they were like the hillbillies of the Palestine world. And he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know this man you're talking about. Now, what's he doing? This call down curses, it means like just like invoking filth. We don't know which words he used, but his intent was, I'm going to talk so filthy that no one standing here is going to think that I could possibly be associated with Jesus. If I swear a blue streak and I call down curses and I do everyone, and you know what the thing is? It worked. Nobody went, no, they're like, no, he couldn't be. This is where they leave him alone. His language. It works. Now later, he broke down and wept. Another place says he wept bitterly. Why? Because he had a relationship with Jesus. See, this is different than going back fishing. This is a betrayal of trust. This is a betrayal of friendship. This is a betrayal of that commitment that he made. This is, I thought we had something. This is the friend stabbing you in the back. This is the friend who's sitting at a table with people who ought to have your back, and instead he joins in the fray. This is the betrayal of the friendship. Now, through all of this, Jesus is still at work. God is still at work in Simon. He's trying to take that relationship and he's trying to leverage it for something even deeper. Peter thinks he's blowing it when in fact Jesus is just sifting away the garbage so that he can get at something even more valuable. So Jesus takes him from curiosity to a quest for personal fulfillment, and then a commitment to Jesus. And then he leverages that commitment into a relationship over time. And now, what is Jesus looking for? Peter thinks he's blown it. He thinks it's done. That's why he wept bitterly. There's no coming back from this, especially because by the end of that weekend, Jesus is slammed into a dark tomb all by himself, and it's all over, and Peter doesn't have a chance to say, I'm sorry. Peter doesn't have a chance to say, I don't know what I was thinking. Just give me one more try. He doesn't have that opportunity. When that tomb slammed shut, Peter's shame echoed with that sound. He started living under this guilt, this shame, this sense, I've blown it, I've failed, my destiny, this thing about becoming a rock, it's over. It's over. And then, the crack of dawn on Sunday morning, as the angel rolls the tomb aside, and Jesus bursts out of the tomb, resurrected in his glory, and starts cruising around, appearing to people. In the wake of all that, the women, the men they still had fled, they had run, but the women who had followed Jesus, including the couple of Marys, that's a common name back then, they had the guts to take some embalming supplies, and they were on their way to the tomb to wrap Jesus' body properly because it had just been stuck in there because they didn't have time before Passover started or a Sabbath started, so they were going to wait till the next day to do it and all that. When they got there, there was an angel, the angel that moved the stone hung out there, waited for them to show up, and this is what the angel said. He said, "Don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples, and make sure you tell Peter." Peter's hurting right now. Peter's living under a guilt and shame I do not want him to carry. Make sure you tell Peter in particular. Because everybody's blown it, but Peter thinks he's gone over the line and can't come back. Tell him that Jesus is going ahead of you into Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you. Now, let me set up the next one. The final scene I want to share with you today. What did Peter do? Now that Jesus is gone, went back fishing. It's all he knows. Not very good at it. Only times we've seen him in the morning, they haven't caught a thing. Has anyone ever taken you fishing? This great spot, you show up, there's not a bite, there's nothing. Peter's not the guy that shows you where to catch fish. But they go back fishing. They're fishing all night. Again, they don't catch anything. Now, I have to believe that God is behind that stymieing of the fishing trip. Because the moment it happens, do you know what? As throughout the night, and they realize they come up empty-handed, do you know what Peter's brain is doing? It's going, yeah, we've been here before. And he's in the boat with a couple of disciples. Remember that time? Maybe, James and John, Peter there. Like, remember that time we were out there, we hadn't caught a thing, and then Jesus brought the mission to us, and we were like, yeah, you got us. And we went out and cast, you haven't caught anything, we'll try again, go into deep water, this huge catch of fish. Remember that? That's what they would have been reminiscing about, right? Well, unknown to them, Jesus has walked to the shoreline in his resurrected form, And he's calling out across the water, and they don't recognize, I don't know if he changed his voice, the Batman, it's me. I don't know, the voice changer, I don't know. But he's like, they don't recognize him, but he says, hey, have you caught any fish? Few? No, it's like, no, nothing. We haven't caught a thing. Oh, well, it's like, try the other side of the boat. I don't, like, they're so tired again. I don't know why they even listen at this point, because they don't know it's Jesus. They try it. They put the net on the other side of the boat, and it's full of fish. Now, instantly in this moment, Peter's like, because again, I have been here before. It's when they start pulling in the fish, immediately the story goes, he says, it's the Lord! And he's been like stripped down into his undies out there, so he's like putting on his robe, his cloak again. Now, why would you do that for what happens next? It says that he jumped out of the boat. Why would you put your cloak on for jumping out of the boat? I think he thinks he's going to walk on water again. That's what I heard someone say like a couple of weeks ago at another sermon. It was like, that's a good insight. Why would you put it on? So anyways, he puts his cloak on, trying to swim with this bathrobe, but he's like splashing to shore. You guys deal with the fish. I left those fish behind a long time ago. That's Jesus. That's where I go, right? So he's like flailing to shore. Jesus is on the shore. He's already got a fire going, serves them breakfast. But he and Peter have some work to do. What does he want from Peter this whole time? What is he looking for? He's starting to see it as Peter's like surging through this, the beach to come to Jesus. It's like reverse Baywatch, He's just like trying to make it not pretty at all. But he doesn't care. He's like going for Jesus. And he's what is Jesus looking for? We find out in the next conversation. Jesus asks him a question 3 times. Here it is, the 3rd time. Jesus said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Each of these questions matching one of those denials. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Peter's hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, but Jesus is going deep. Because sometimes you have to say things that hurt to go deep. Do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. We'll get into what happens next in the rest of Peter's story in a later message. But from this moment, it's all about that. He's like, I'm all in. See, curiosity can only take you so far. Your personal fulfillment, your personal quest can only take you so far. Commitment can get you in the gates of heaven. To commitment to Jesus as Lord and Savior, but can only get you so far. Jesus is looking for a relationship with you. But not just that. He is looking for you to be head over heels in love with you like he's head over heels in love with him, like he's head over heels in love with you. Because when it's about love, you dive headlong into the water and you splash through it. When it's about love, you get up in front of crowds and you address them boldly. And when it's about love, you don't cave when you're being questioned anymore. When it's about love, you're willing to get crucified like your Lord, upside down, like Peter did at the end of his life. This is the moment where Peter went all in. Now, I want you to notice that the man Jesus called the rock wasn't one when he started. So you might be here this morning thinking, I'm not a rock. Either was Peter. Again, if we can put Peter front and center as an example of a rock, then God can take you and your waffling and your up and down and your heart that wanders, and he can make you committed and you make me committed. He can draw us in and he can make us the rock that he wants us to be. He can do it for you. In fact, he's doing it for you if you will let him. This is our path. The question I want to end with today is, where are you stuck? So let's go through these. Are you stuck somewhere between leveraging your curiosity into a quest? If it's just something you're wondering about without actually leaning into, if you're seeking Jesus, you're wondering if he's real, you need to turn that curiosity into a quest. That's your next step. If you're not ready to commit yet, don't commit just because I said so. To make that a quest, see if Jesus is who he says he is. Examine the scriptures. Do it. Just like we've been doing today. Maybe you're stuck. You've made it about your own personal fulfillment, this quest. And then you get stuck talking about how the church is meeting your needs or not, because it's about you and it's about your quest. Maybe you're stuck. You need to make that commitment to Jesus. You need to go, you're my God, you're my Lord, you're my Savior. You need to flop down like one of those fish and go, I'm in, I'm yours. Or maybe you need to do that again because you forgot. And you slip back into the personal quest mode. Do you see how this works? Maybe for you, it's about leveraging that. You've made a commitment to Jesus, but let's be honest, it's not a relationship. You just say it is. You don't actually listen. You're not actually hearing. You're not actually doing stuff with him. You're not hanging out with him. You're not spending time in his word. You're not loving him and adoring him like you do with someone that you're in a relationship with. So maybe that's it. Or maybe for you, it's leveraging your relationship and realizing that Jesus is trying to build love out of that relationship. A self-sacrificing love where you're all in and you could die for him. I'll live for you. I'll die for you. I love you. Just like you would do for someone you're madly in love with on a human level. Now you'll notice that this is a cycle because the more we love Jesus, the more curious we get. Which ends up becoming that quest, a new quest and a fresh commitment and the deeper love and all of that stuff, all of that stuff can go over and over again. But there's no one in this room, I don't think, that isn't somewhere here. So where are you stuck? And what are you going to do about it? Jesus is going to show up at work, you know. He's going to show up in the car. He's going to show up in your parenting. Because he wants you. And he wants to use you.